Before update 35 in Deep Rock Galactic, Engineer was already a stacked class, but there was one major thing it couldn't do nearly as well as Driller or Gunner. Engineer can now do everything that the other classes can do about as well as or even better than they can. This video is about how the LOK-1 Smart Rifle is the exact thing that the Engineer has been missing in Deep Rock Galactic. Make sure to stick around to the end for the build I recommend when you first unlock this weapon and have no overclocks. If this helps you out, hitting the like button will recommend the video to more people and help other players out. Subscribe to the channel for tons of weapon builds that are coming out very soon. Thank you. So what exactly is the LOK-1? The LOK-1 is the brand new primary weapon for the Engineer class. What's so cool about it is you hold the trigger down, move your reticle over targets to highlight and lock onto them, and then let go of the trigger to fire a bunch of bullets out. It's actually really cool. Depending on the mods and overclocks you run, you can target more enemies at a time or shoot more bullets per burst. Up until right now, the Engineer hasn't been able to do one thing in particular exceptionally well, at least not really to the level of the other classes that have been excelling here. Engineer has and is still the king of locking down a zone and being a massive explosive damage dealer, but always one enemy at a time. Don't get me wrong, the Engineer has never been bad at crowd control. You have the Fat Boy overclock on the PGL, the Breach Cutter can take out a bunch of enemies at a time, and both the Warthog and the Stubby can get you through a swarm with no problem. But none of those weapons quite have the ability to shred through tons of enemies quickly for a long time, just like the Driller or the Gunner's primaries. That's honestly what the LOK-1 reminds me of. It reminds me of the Gunner's primaries being able to take multiple enemies at the same time, but you're not completely sacrificing damage to do so. Like the Gunner, it can do both. Engineer still has the Scout and Driller's knack for getting to anything anywhere that it's always had, as well as being the best class at defending a zone in my opinion, but now it has more of a Gunner's level of swarm clearing, which has been arguably the best in the game. Engineer pretty much has it all now. Let me show you just how well it deals with swarms. In multiple situations, I was the last alive with a massive swarm between me and my teammates, their bodies just covered in bugs. Normally I'd rely on my secondary weapon for the wave clearing, which can be really bad in these clutch or wipe situations, because you're usually really low on ammo when this happens. Both the Stubby and Warthog can carry here, but I think the LOK-1 is so much better at wave clear. Like I keep saying, I think it's almost like having a Gunner's primary instead. Also, a pro tip with the LOK-1, the bullets travel the path of the red lines that appear on your screen. By looking up, down, or left or right, you can choose the path that those bullets will take. So for Magterra that are up in the air, look down so that the bullets will then travel up into the belly of the Magterra. The LOK-1's not perfect by any means. There still is a trade-off that you're making by going with the LOK-1 instead of the Warthog or the Stubby. You're going to be going through ammo pretty quickly, so that's always going to be a concern when you're thinking about using and building the LOK-1, especially if you're going for a has-5 add clear build. Sometimes it did get me into some bad situations where I'd be pressing the trigger down to start locking onto targets and the gun wasn't really recognizing I was doing anything. It was just ignoring the grunts speeding towards my face and not picking them up on the scan. It was like the most dangerous staring contest I've ever played because I'd have to panic run away and then try retargeting enemies again once I get some distance between the bugs and I. This is probably just some very minor bug that'll get fixed sometime when the developers get to it. Nothing game breaking or rage inducing, just something slightly concerning to keep in mind. The build I recommend for no overclocks is really good at ad clear. It's still pretty decent at single target DPS, just not really against oppressors because their entire bodies are covered in armor, and you'll need to tap fire the LOK-1 into their backs for normal damage. In tier 1, I go with increased caliber rounds because the +6 damage is just a free almost 30% buff to all of your damage. Don't get me wrong, expanded ammo bags is very tempting, but I'd rather mow down my share of enemies faster so I can safely get to a resupply pod instead of having a lot more ammo, but all of that ammo just goes into the same number of enemies. In tier 2, this was a very hard choice to make, mostly because it's very murky on what the difference between macro and zoom lens is. I don't want to overinflate this video unpacking all of the stats on the LOK-1 and what everything does. I think your time is valuable and you're probably here on this video just trying to figure out why you should use the LOK-1 and what's a good build to use when you don't have any overclocks yet. I want to respect that. Zoom lens is my preferred lens here because it's a great middle ground between CCD and macro lens. You get some of the benefits from both without some of the trade-offs. The next video video is going to unpack all of the nitty-gritty details about the LOK-1, so you'll have all of the tools to build some awesome builds for yourself. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. In tier 3, I go electrochemical rounds because bullets do more damage to targets under the on fire or electrocution status effects, and you can proc the electrocution status effect by using the electric generator mod in tier 5. And in tier 4, I go shutter speed sensor for faster lock-ons. The LOK-1 Smart Rifle is just such a cool weapon that Ghost Ship Games made for the Engineer. The way it can just shred through so many enemies is awesome and makes playing Engineer more fun for me. I think this weapon is a great addition for the Engineer class. So subscribe to the channel for more content that helps you enjoy Deep Rock Galactic more, and like this video if it helped you out. Liking the video will help other players see the video and helps make sure you see what's coming next, going over everything in the LOK-1, so you know how to make better builds for yourself. I hope sharing why this weapon gives Engineer the ad clear ability it's never had before helped you if you're on the fence about using this weapon, and I hope the beginner build helps you get started. Thanks for watching.